Before you begin, one thing, let me express my admiration for him. I'm a strange communist, like Marx, who said that one can learn more from a conservative like Balzac than from all progressives about economy. I think that our only true partners, the true leftists today, are modest, intelligent, honest skeptics, conservatives. This morning he provided the best, I'm grateful for it, the best definition of myself. He told me that he considers me a moderate conservative communist. My gratitude to you. Thank you.
I would like to pursue this theme. Thank you for your remarks. The assigned topic was why I am still a communist. I think, in fact, what you argued was why I am no longer a communist, and you can be thought of as favoring a kind of social democracy with more effort directed at climate change. But before we get to psychoanalyzing you, let me start with a simple factual question. So you cite China as the biggest success story of communism. But is it so successful? It has right now the per capita income pretty much exactly equal to Mexico, not so impressive. Yeah. If you look at capitalist Taiwan, it has the per capita income of France, single-payer health insurance, gay marriage. It's a complete liberal democracy. Life there is very nice. Furthermore, the last 30 years, the air in Taiwan has become much cleaner, and the air in China has become much sturdier. So why isn't China the failure, Taiwan the success, and yes, it's a vote for capitalism, not communism?
Yeah, you're already asking me a question. Okay.
Yes, it's a real question.
No, okay. No. First, but if you compare what China 50 years ago, the difference is still absolutely shocking. Look at Shanghai, Beijing today, and so on. Second point, forget about per capita, compare prices and so on, and you will see that today's China, the standard of living of middle classes, at least in the developed part, numbers at this level don't tell a lot, but at one point I agree with you that this, in the long term, this, whatever we call it, Chinese authoritarian capitalism or whatever we call it, will not work, I think.
And China has put over 1 million people in concentration camps. Their labor force is already shrinking, rate of growth is falling, so you are in fact a moderate right pro-Taiwan communist. Yes?
No, but, okay, no, can I briefly answer you very honestly? I see all your points, I agree with them, but my point is this one, nonetheless, and now I want to ask you, if I may,
Absolutely.
A question. Yes. Okay, I know we exaggerate, and I'm well aware of, I emphasized it, do you remember, how easy it is to fall into this fascination by catastrophic prospect. Do you remember? No, you are not old enough. I am, some of you must. Around 30, 40 years ago, most of Europe, especially Germany,
I remember very well.
No, was obsessed by Waldsterben, dying of forest.
In Germany then.
And I remember the cover of Spiegel, they demonstrated exactly with statistics that 40, 50 years after that time, today, Europe will be without forests. I'm sad to tell you, but according to some statistics, today there are more forests in the world than at any point in last 100 years. So I'm over-aware of this fascination of catastrophe. But nonetheless, I think, and you can deny it, I will not, when we communists take over, you will go to Gulag, but for different reasons.
Where will you go?
You know why I'm glad to talk with him? That, in today's politically correct climate, in typical Western academic institution, you cannot talk like that, No, but seriously. But I nonetheless see these threats, and I could go on indefinitely, like digital control and so on. Things are serious there, the extent to which we are manipulated already and so on. Ecology, immigration, and did you notice, I'm not a simple humanitarian there. I just don't share this simple optimism, open on hearts, and what? All the poor will move to Europe and whatever. So how, very simple question, I will try to cut myself short. How these three domains that I outlined, I think, at least in the long term, they need a more radical, something will have to happen. Do you probably you don't agree. Do you see them as serious threats? Are you still a Fukuyamaist in the sense of we just make a system function a little bit better? I'm skeptical there.
The threats you mention, I all see as serious. But ecology, keep in mind, the communist nations were the worst polluters and still are.
Yes.
Surveillance, the worst culprits. China, right? Not a fully communist nation. But nonetheless, surveillance is worst in China.
No,
If you're worried about genetic engineering and the reshaping of mankind, biggest offender is likely to be China.
No, I even know, it may surprise you, the exact data. I was shown by a friend in suburb of Shanghai, already clinics. Okay, sorry, I will not lose too much time. This will interest you. I met years ago in Frankfurt Book Fair one high guy from Chinese Academy of Sciences, and he gave me printed in English the short programmatic note. And it says, it shocked me, literally, the goal of biogenetic in China is to regulate physical and psychic health of the Chinese nation. They are directly doing it. What I only don't like is, don't just evoke China as this ultimate horror. We are basically doing the same, I claim.
Let me now get to my theory of you. Now, there's an old interview I read with you, and I found this passage quite striking. Quote, and sympathetic, I should add. The movies I watch are often old Stalinist movies. The songs that I listen to are old communist songs. ... I fully admit it, but it is also my pleasure. Now, also, you're from Slovenia, you're from the Balkans. That part of the world has not developed ideally. There are far-right parties in many places. There's been war. The Balkans are still a disappointment. So there's a negative outlook on the world you're from, and I view your attachment to the communist label as a kind of nostalgia, like the old Stalinist songs, which you don't actually think are better than Beethoven, but it's some like the old East German women who love their Spreewald pickles, the old cars, the Trabis. And the communist label for you, it's like your Spreewald pickles, the Gorky. It's like the Trabi. And why not just cast it aside and live free? Why be so tied to your own nostalgia? That's my question.
Okay, my counter question is then that obviously what I read today around are nonetheless, I'm more of a pessimist. You see, we are coming back to this basic dilemma.
But you need this nostalgia, right? Why not free yourself by jettisoning the nostalgia? And take the next step. If I were your therapist, this is what I would be asking you to do.
Okay, let's go on. I don't want to lose your time, but what really fascinates me in Stalinism is how, if you look at it closely, how fascinated Stalinism was by American, for example, do you know that that's why I like Soviet cinemas, that the absolute model of Soviet cinema was Hollywood. They had desperate plans in the 30s to build on crime, their own version of Hollywood, how they imitated Hollywood, and so on and so on. I claim that, you know, even explicitly, when Stalin was asked around 1930, his definition of a Bolshevik, he said, the one which combines Russian dedication to a sacred cause with American pragmatism, efficiency, and so on and so on. But, you know, behind this, what you call nostalgia is, for me, nonetheless, it's much more traumatic, if you want it. I'm the first to admit, and that's my, maybe we share the opinion here, that's my criticism of, one of the criticisms of Frankfurt School. As I always repeat, look at Habermas. At his work, he began publishing in early 50s. Read all his work, and I don't think you will even guess from his published text that there is something like communism in East Germany. Frankfurt School, in a strange way, almost totally, I know there is Marcuse's book, Soviet Marxism, but it's very specific. And you know what makes it so strange? The central thesis of late Frankfurt School is dialectic of enlightenment. Horrors of 20th century, fascism, Stalinism, are not simply regressions to some dark past. They are deployment of a certain totalitarian, whatever we call them, potentials in the project of modernity itself. Okay, but isn't Stalinism a much more traumatic example of this than fascism? With fascism, things are relatively simple, I think. It's a model of conservative revolution and so on and so on. But Bolshevism, which tried to do a radical emancipation and it turned into a traumatic nightmare. I think even today we don't have a good theory of Stalinism. That's what bothers me, not any return to it. I will give you as a proof that it's not in this sense nostalgia, I will give you another example. I have such a memory. I always tell my friends jokes about life in the army. I served in the mid-70s in Yugoslav army. But you know, like, it was a nightmare, I know. But what fascinated me was never did I learn so much about ideology and my politically correct friend don't. For example, I wonder if some of you know, you don't have here anymore military service in Norway. But basically, on the one hand, Yugoslav army was, as all armies probably, absolutely homophobic. You were gay, you were beaten by fellow soldiers every night discreetly before being thrown out. But at the same time, crucial, absolutely crucial, the entire life was totally penetrated by homosexual innuendos and so on. In my unit, we didn't say good morning. We say, I'll smoke your prick. Thanks, and after I finish with yours. So, you see, all these paradoxes, what fascinates me about ideology is, and this where communism interests me, is how, this is why Yugoslavia, which was relatively liberal communism, interests me. Do you know that in Yugoslavia, it wasn't just we have our own ideology, self-managed socialism? I mean this literally. Slovenia was a small country. We knew everybody else. Nomenclatura.
This is sounding like more nostalgia to me. Army tales. We talked about smoking the prick, right?
Okay, but the lesson I learned there, I don't care if you call it nostalgia, the lesson and I will tell you where I see real nostalgia today. The lesson for me is how an ideology can function, not only even if you don't believe in it, but it is prohibited to believe in it. This was the beautiful paradox of ex-Yugoslavia. I had two friends who worked in the Central Committee of the Slovene Party. They lost their job, you know why? Because they were stupid and took the ruling ideology too seriously. But you know who are, for me, change the topic, but along the same line, the true nostalgics today. That's why I don't like the novel. This will again hurt some of you. Margaret Atwood, Handmaid's Tale. This is for me true nostalgia. It's what Frederick Jameson called nostalgia for the present. It paints this horrible near future. It doesn't raise the crucial question. But she's still too fascinated by our permissive societies and so on and so on. You know, sorry,
these are side issues. If I visit your debate with Jordan Peterson, it's on YouTube, I felt you won that debate. And it's striking to me the discussion between 1 hour, 10 minutes, and 1 hour, 18 minutes. And in that part of the discussion, you say that you calling yourself a communist is a bit of a provocation. But now I'd like to draw a comparison. Take the writer who just won the Nobel Prize in Literature, Peter Handke, right? Sometimes called an Austrian, but he's ethnic Slovene. He has sympathized with the Serbian atrocities. Yeah. And you are hard on him, correctly so. You don't give him the space of that being a provocation. He is so close to your world that you apply a more absolutist moral standard, and you want him to jettison his Serbian nostalgia, and I am submitting that
but communism... I have no nostalgia. For what do I have nostalgia?
The attachment to the label communist. You can do everything you want without that word, without the concept, without having to apologize
let's go step by step, Handke.
You know the old joke, what's the difference between a communist and a Nazi? Tenure, right?
You mean university tenure? Or
yes, it's a joke, but the point is, you don't need communism. You are much smarter than communism.
Let's go step by step. First, Handke. My criticism of him was very specific.
And correct.
Even before he got involved into what he got involved to, I didn't like the game he played. For example, I remember his text from 30 years ago, 40, before war, where he said, in Austria, everything is commodified. You go to a store, every brand of milk has a name. You cross the border to poor Slovenia, it just says milk, with no brand name and so on. And what I hate is, we should agree even here, I call, through borrowing the term of my friend, another Austrian philosopher, Robert Fowler, interpassive authenticity. You want to keep your, good life in the West, but you like to be authentic through others. This is why we were very good. He was proud to refer to us Slovenes, Handke, insofar as we were the modest poor communists. The moment we wanted our own state, join European Union, we betrayed his dream. That's why, maybe you know, in the text, I quote this wonderful saying by Gilles Deleuze, si vous êtes pris dans le rêve de l'autre, vous êtes foutu. If you are caught into another's dream, and that's, for me, we should agree here, the big problem of Western academic left. They're always searching for another place where things really happen. When I was young, it was Cuba. Then it was a decade ago, Chavez, Venezuela, and so on and so on. No, nothing great happens elsewhere and so on. And to my Serb friends, I declare that they will see. If they will succeed too well, he will betray them also. They will disappoint him. You know, this is what annoys me with Handke, if you ask me. But listen, talking about nostalgia, I'm sorry to tell you, but I'm not saying I was a great dissident. But now I will say something arrogant. If there are not some great dissidents from Eastern Europe here, then probably I can venture a hypothesis that I did more for the disappearance of East European communism than any of you in this room. I was for 5 years unemployed. I had to survive through parents and so on and so on. So I was there when it was needed. And so on. And I'm even a little bit proud to say that the role I played at that time is that when you said we have problems, right-wing politicians, yes, we also do it, but Slovenia is the only post-Yugoslav country where nationalists never took over. That we did. I was, at that time, it will shock you, member of a party called Liberal Democratic Party. And we did it. But you know what? For me, again, I return to that.
I appreciate what you've
but
done
please
for your
ask
country,
me that
but I
question.
feel my
How
case
will
is
we deal
becoming
with
stronger.
ecology? You really think that with market, a little bit of that, it can be dealt?
No, we need much more than that.
We need more.
We don't know what to do,
I call that more communism. You know why? People, idiots, tell me, not you. Why don't you call it socialism? Everybody is a socialist today. Bill Gates says he's a socialist and so on. It's meaningless. Socialism basically means today you care for society. Hitler cared for society. I don't care. You know, I just want to signal that, as you nicely said now, something a little bit more radical will be needed. That's all I'm saying.
Sometimes I love your books. I've read more than half of them, which
Crazy,
is a lot.
madman. Your Gulag sentence is redoubled now.
But one thing I crave is to one day just see you writing about a question like the electric tram in Bergen. Should it go through a tunnel or not? And you would not be allowed to mention Fukuyama. You couldn't use the C word, capitalism or communism. And just analyze that question. Or look at a municipal bus system in Denmark somewhere. And those, to me, are in some ways more real questions.
We have a misunderstanding, because I will tell you why not this. This may surprise you, the answer.
Yes.
First, you know, this was the point, you know, when in my short speech, when I said I despise, for me, the model of catastrophe today is, my friends, they cried, Tahrir Square, Syntagma. We were there, 1 million people. We were all crying, wonderful. I say F off. What interests me, I hope we agree here, is what happens 2 months later.
Sure.
Well, I'm all for these pragmatic, concrete problems. I'm not waiting for a big revolution. I just am, now this may surprise you for somebody who may sound so bombastic and pretentious like me. You know, strange as it will sound, but I don't know everything. You know? Like, I'm immediately thinking in literal terms, what to do, so many factors. I don't know enough. I like this totally empirical, totally concrete empirical problems. I like paradoxes. For example, would you agree, very briefly, maybe you found this in one of my books, I'm not quoting this as an argument for anti-capitalism. I don't know that. But there are some group experiments which fascinate me, which proves that you cannot reduce some forms of solidarity to money. A Jewish friend from Israel told me this. They had a kindergarten there, and
this story is apocryphal. People have tried to follow up on the kindergarten in Israel story. It's probably not true.
Really?
Yes.
Are we talking about one when they made pay even
yes,
less?
we're not sure this is true. I've looked into
Really?
this. It's possibly true. It cannot be confirmed. But I accept the point.
Yes,
Sometimes when
the
everything
point
has
is
a
that
price,
I believe it
people lose
surprisingly,
solidarity.
when I talk about communism and so on, my God, I've written texts on it, and now I go on into it. For me, communism is just, as I emphasize, and the name of a problem is not a solution. Now I will say something that will shock you. I'm well aware, some of my communist friends admitted that even if we imagine something similar to communism, the mega problem will be envy and so on. And this is, who is one of the great guys, my God, the one who conducted Chile according to leftist mythology, not Pinochet, the economist, free market, who advised Pinochet according...
Holberg.
No, the big guy, sorry? I think...
He only visited once or twice.
No, that was not my point, but one of those guys, when reproached with the fact that but capitalism is unjust, you work harshly, you fail, your neighbor was there, he said, but that's why capitalism works. Because he said, your pride survives intact. Let's say we are two guys. We live in a just society. And if there is no lack and injustice, this means if you are richer than me, I have to admit that I'm more stupid than you. But capitalist injustice, it's a very elegant argument.
Communism is easy in a way. You always have an excuse, right?
Yeah.
The system screwed me
That's
over,
why,
and you're always
now
right.
I will ask you, this is my big argument against happiness. Do you agree, if you are now like my Stasi observer, you have your list of
Yes.
You remember when I argue about happiness against,
Yes.
I take as an example, and I was there, I talk with people. Husak's Czechoslovakia in the 70s. Material needs were basically satisfied. Nobody was doing that. And as you said, you always had an excuse. There was too much rain or drought. Communists screwed it up. Then, very important, you had a nearby country, West Germany, which was the ideal other, but it was not too far away and so on. That's why I'm against happiness. Happiness means no responsibility, relatively comfortable life, you know. Because already after Khrushchev, basically, with Brezhnev, you must know this, communists in power made a pact with population. They admitted we will never reach the West, but the message was, you leave us political power, we leave you your private niche where you can enjoy your life and so on and so on. I think that Khrushchev was paradoxically, don't you agree, the last guy who somehow paradoxically, he was sincere in that, you must know it, United Nations speech where the last epoch where the ruling nomenclatura half still believed in communism. After that, it's a totally different logic of emancipation. Some of the communists in power, I love this in Yugoslavia, even referred to Marcuse Frankfurt School. They said, but in the West, you have commodification, alienation. Here, you can take it easy, it's more poor, and so on and so on. Sorry, I talk too much.
Let me praise you some more.
No,
all your books I've read, one of my favorite things in the books is how much humor you have. And in person,
for this
whether speaking or over breakfast.
For this, I will share your cell in Gulag, probably.
Your humor, which is based on insight, right, rather than Henny Youngman type of jokes, is phenomenally good. But here's what strikes me. You have the humor of a right-winger, of a right-wing moderate. So if you think of today's left, it is increasingly humorless. You're not allowed to talk about so many things. On gender, your views are much more right-wing than left-wing.
That's debatable.
So
I don't know
the
what
left-wing is moving. When I sit down with my right-wing friends and they joke around, their jokes are in broad terms like yours. Left-wing.
My answer to this, not
humor
critical
is
of you,
above
it's a very
politics.
simple one. My answer to this is that's why the politically correct leftists are doing all possible to get Trump re-elected, if you ask me. A little bit more years on this and we will be where we are. But let me add, as a sign of friendship to you, another bad taste humor about you. You are my friend, I like you. So when we communists take over, nonetheless, because you are objectively guilty, you go to Gulag.
Okay.
But as a special favor to you, you know what you got on better days in Gulag, on Saturday? Some kind of disgusting soup, entrails and heads, half-rotten fishes and potato.
Maybe some bread in it.
Don't exaggerate.
Okay.
And I will call from my Moscow center.
Yes.
And isn't it nice? You will get 2 plates of that soup. So
do you agree you have an increasingly right-wing sense of humor, and that if we're going to be
But why do you call it right-wing? When I was young,
to
this
make
was
fun of your
left-wing
sense of
humor.
irony. It is no longer left-wing humor. The world has
Then
moved
so much
on.
worse for the
Perhaps
left.
for the worse. Okay, we're making progress.
Maybe.
You are indeed the moderate right, communist, nostalgia, rum state communist who is maybe almost ready to abandon that final bit of the nostalgia.
Don't count on that too much, because I still think that the crisis will hit us. I see signs. Here comes my pessimism. I think that the situation today with new right-wing, blah, 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 and here, as we already talked about it, I'm very open. For example, do they exist here? Not. We talked about it, so-called incels. Celibataires. Usually they are decried as the worst, women-hating fascists. No, they do something, I think, almost tragic. They try to turn their failure, and already this is politically incorrect to state today. You cannot address a woman, almost it's prohibited, saying she is beautiful. You cannot say to a man, you are non-attractive enough, you cannot get any woman. But that's their experience. And I admire how, without any immanent violence, they turn this into a wonderful performance, especially clown cells and so on. It's a wonderful way to survive a pretty terrifying predicament. And I don't buy that they are automatically neo-fascist and so on. Concerning feminism, and my reproach to Me Too is not they are too radical and so on, but it's an upper middle class fake. They don't really, the American feminism should first do, I hope we agree here, a little bit of a good old-fashioned Stalinist, you will say again, nostalgia, self-criticism. There are so many things of American feminism. Do you know, for example, they supported American invasion of Iraq, that it will help women? Well, we know today that the situation of women today in Iraq is much worse than under Saddam. Saddam was a brutal despot, but relatively secular. Women had today. It's I mean, it's I don't. This is what bothers me. Second problem. You will again say I'm conservative here. Fuck it, I don't care. The problem with political correctness is for me that questions which are questions of not manners in a superficial sense, but of customs. Here I am, as you know, a Hegelian. Hegel always emphasized the basis that holds society together are unwritten rules, customs, and so on. Political correctness tried too much to legalize it, you know. You are allowed to call this name. They try to, for example, let me give you a provocative example, you know it, to provoke you. Once I problematized, how is it called, this idea of consent, even bureaucratic consent. You have to state it on a selfie sign before mutual agreement. And they say, oh, so I think we can rape women, we don't need consent. They totally misread me. On the opposite, I just claim consent in itself is good, better than nothing. But it doesn't solve the problem. There is so much pressure, violence, which can survive the forum of consent. Even if there is a formal consent, sexual exploitation can go on and so on and so on. My problem with LGBT+, as if I'm attacking them. No, the problem I see there, I wonder if you agree, is this one. I have a problem with identity politics. The problem is that the idea of predominant, there are many LGBT+ who are extremely good theorists. Persons. But the predominant view is the one of this one. I simplify it. There is some kind of a multiplicity of gender positions flourishing. It's almost the Maoist version. You know, let the 100 flowers blossom. Let 100 books, gender, bisex, trisex, and then evil patriarchy comes, imposes the binary division. Let's get rid of these, and some of them even establish a list, 30, 35 positions. My God, and then they say Freud is outdated. If there is anything to learn from Freud, is that sexuality is in itself antagonist, traumatic, shady domains, and so on and so on. That's my first point. So it's as if, what bothers me in LGBT+ is as if we get rid of social pressure, we get some kind of happy sexuality. The first presupposition that I adopt here is because you do what you desire. My God, didn't they read Freud? How do you know that you really desire what you think that you desire? There are all the ambiguities here. My second problem, and that's the theoretical one. Let's move into Hegel a little bit. Maybe you know my line. LGBT+, it's all about plus, no? Because the ordinary LGBT theorists are, for me, two British empiricists. Plus is for them simply, maybe we don't yet know all identities, let's leave it open. You know, like maybe there will be other gender identities, we will include them. No. As I got this, I forgot her name, I'm sorry, from an Australian LGBT theorist, very intelligent lady, who wrote to me, but what if plus itself is a subjective position? You can be a plus in the sense of, you know, at a distance, doubting, and I think this is feminine position at its stronger. I will go to absolutely everyday level. That's why the most provocative woman's answer is, why do you love me? Because there is no answer to this question. The moment you answer it, it's not true love, by definition. If I tell you why I love you, then it becomes matter of, you know, so what I'm saying is that I just try to complicate things.
Why not move to Singapore?
Yeah.
It's a wonderful country, and
yes.
If you ask which nation has the quality of government and the thoughtfulness and the long time horizon to actually deal with ecological problems, are they not near or at the top of the list? And therefore, you and I can join hands in embracing Singapore and presenting it to the world.
You know, here I may be too
pretty good
Marxist, but isn't it that Singapore nonetheless enjoys its role as structural an exception? I don't think you can expand Singapore to Indonesia. Already with Malaysia there are problems and so on and so on.
Well, every country is different, but clearly Singapore
it's
has
stronger
worked,
there. Because,
right?
you know, I read somewhere that Singapore port is, even at some point it was the busiest port in the world and so on. Which means they are kind of a nodal point for the countries around them and so on. I doubt. Second thing, maybe I have here too much liberal sensitivity. But nonetheless, you know, it's a kind of the way I would define Singapore, you may disagree, is fascism with a human face. A very human face, it's consensual and so on, but there are so strict limits, even at the everyday ridiculous level. For example, I was there with my son who wanted some chewing gum. We went to a store and they laughed at me. Are you crazy? You have to go to pharmacy. We went to a pharmacy. They said, okay, where do you have doctor's prescription? I said, no.
But this is fine. This is not fascism. Singapore did that because too many people were leaving the chewing gum on the subway doors and it was creating a problem. Maybe they overreacted.
Now you are
your criticism of Singapore is about the chewing gum.
No, what
I say, come join me at the food stalls, right?
Where, in Singapore?
Yeah, I know where all the best ones are, right? Jump on board, forget the communist thing. The nostalgia can be for Singapore 13 years ago, which in some ways was less crowded, right? It's a better nostalgia.
No, but again, don't you see where my communism comes seriously? It's precisely, it's not where you think, I don't think there is any link with me clinging to the name communism and my nostalgia. Those times, I'm well aware, were more or less a nightmare, I mean. Listen, one reason against nostalgia is that I was jobless. Although, you may know this joke, something wonderful happened. When people ask me which was the key factor for your relative success in the West, I told them communist oppression. Because I applied for a job when I finished my doctoral studies in 1973, and this was the harsh line. I couldn't get the job. And then I was, for a couple of years, unemployed. I was looking for contacts in the West. Without communist oppression, I would have been now an unknown professor in city of Ljubljana, Slovenia.
Sometimes you remind me of Laibach, the Slovenian rock group.
They're my friend, my God. I'm with them from late 80s,
yes.
And now things get complicated there. You know why? Because many leftists who support them are nonetheless afraid.
Of course.
Okay, they are staging totalitarian rituals. What if some people will take it seriously and so on?
And once they were asked, are you a fascist? And one of them said, I am a fascist like Hitler was a painter. What answer is that? I don't know. But why can't they just say, I'm not a fascist? And then you could say, I'm not a communist. And you and Laibach, and we could all meet in the food stalls of Singapore. Taiwan, have a nice time, right? Work on better batteries so solar power can really save us. We could have the government subsidize, better battery technology. I know it's not all we need to do, but... And then think about that electric tram and the tunnel,
another
diesel from the cruise ships.
I can tell you from my personal contact with Laibach that they don't mean it as an ironic spectacle. They are very serious in their harsh line. That's what I like about them. They are not, don't be afraid, we are not really totalitarians, it's just one big social game and so on and so on. But at a certain point, I didn't want to join them because they wanted me, you probably know, 2 years ago when they went to
North Korea.
No, it would be too much.
Sure, of course.
I didn't want to do
too communist for you.
Yeah. No, but nonetheless, you know what was so interesting with Laibach? Here you have the complexity of ideological process that all this fear, will they be manipulated by radical right and so on, they never were. Whenever they are popular, it's never the right. I know what the right-wingers, at least in Europe, are listening. It's not the German version of Laibach. There was some influence. Do you know Rammstein, the group? Links, they are left. And it's a beautiful, the right thing to do for the left to appropriate this horrible totalitarian-sounding stuff and so on and so on. The right-wingers that I know, they think beautiful, romantic songs, apolitical usually, and so on and so on. But still, you know where I get your point, of course. I still, when you said no, something more will be needed. F you, what more? Tell me. You say, no, it's not, I know ecology and so on, digital control. Have you any idea what? What more will be needed? What do you think? That ecological party will be elected? I hope so, maybe.
That's why I like Bergen, it's 20% electric cars. Now, I don't know what Bergen did to get that, but many parts of the world could learn from whatever has been done here. And we're at 20, let's work for 60, right?
Yeah, but on the other hand, my only, not criticism of Norway, is that you have oil, gas, and so on, you can,
of course.
I would like to learn from Norway, but I would like even more if you give me your natural resources.
To earn from the oil and then divest from fossil fuels.
Although I have one argument for you here. The good thing about Singapore is that they have no natural resources, no?
Well, they do a lot of refining there, so.
Refining, yes. But no.
Not that I'm aware of.
But what made it? Is it kind of one incidental conjunction? That's what I would have maybe said about Singapore of this Chinese proclivity to hard work and English legislation, or what? There must have been some unique combination there.
Keep in mind, the Chinese themselves felt at first that the Chinese who went to Singapore were kind of the losers who were not doing well in China, the poorly educated peasants. But the Singaporean government thought, let's invest in human capital.
When? Which government? I'm talking about Lee Kuan Yew.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it worked for the most part.
But what's then your problem with China? Because do you know, you must know this, that at the beginning of his reforms, Deng Xiaoping came to Singapore. Everybody, everywhere there, they showed it and said Singapore should be a model for...
It is time for China to liberalize. I don't see them doing that. They seem to be moving in the opposite direction.
Here, now we touch the true problem. Sorry, now I'm not losing time. You know where I am a pessimist? Some of my liberal friends tell me, oh, China achieved so much with full political liberalization, they would have achieved even more. I doubt it.
We don't know the counterfactual. Speaking of counterfactual,
I love
have
them.
a question for you about Donald Trump.
Yeah.
So you initially said, well, if Trump wins, it could be good because it will revitalize the left.
He did.
There was then another article where people asked you, did you really mean it? And you said maybe a year ago, yes. But I look at the Democratic race. Front runner number one is Joseph Biden, age, I think, 77.
Yeah.
He was vice president for 8 years. Mayor Pete is now number two because he took a moderate stance.
Sorry, who is name?
Mayor Pete Buttigieg.
I'm so sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that name.
I'm not sure I do either. But he's mayor from South Bend, Indiana. To me, a perfectly fine candidate. And the Democratic conservatives are in the ascendancy. And where the Democrats have gone hard left is identity politics. And that's exactly the thing you hate. So why has it been good? We have 4 years of Trump, maybe 8 years of Trump.
We don't have time to go it, but let me be specific. The Democrats who go for identity politics, already Hillary tried this against Donald Trump.
Yes, and now it's much more radical.
Against Bernie Sanders.
Sure.
That's why I admire Alessandria Ocasio-Cortez, who said something very ingenious. You must have read it. Who said, recently endorsing Bernie Sanders, I endorsed him not in spite of him being an old white man, but because. Her idea was this one. Bernie Sanders can get us. We don't need, center Democrats are obsessed, if you go too much to the left, we lose this centrist vote and so on. Trump did exactly the opposite. I think the target of the Democratic Party should be those impoverished, white, half-unemployed workers who otherwise would have voted for Trump, not those middle of the road and so on and so on. Trump is a genius here, how he broke all the rules and so on. Because do you remember how often in his campaign, when he said something, I know, preposterous, horrible, liberal press said, oh, Trump just shot himself, he's over and so on. No, it's not over. Trump proved that sometimes the only way to majority is through extremes. It's not always that center works.
But I worry here there's a parallel, your views and pronouncements on Trump and on communism. So in the case of Trump, you think, well, I can say this. I have a vision that will work out a particular way. The Democratic left will be revitalized.
But
what we have gotten is the worst of the left.
They may lose,
the identity politics.
It was revitalized.
And the moderates are on the rise. And then there's a sense of, well, I can attach myself to communism. I have a particular theory that will work out some way. It will tell us we always need more when it comes to ecology. But that to me seems like the Trump prediction. We know from the work of Philip Tetlock, it's just very hard to predict the future. So why not stand up directly for just the right values? Like take Greta Thunberg, right? I don't agree with everything she says, but her core message is correct. She is unambiguous. She's to the point.
Yeah.
It's not ironic. There's not some complicated theory.
She is the contemporary communist for me. Fully. You know why? No, but you know what? I know. Forget. You know what I like about her?
Magnus Carlsen is a communist.
But you know what I like about Greta Thunberg? First, you remember some media in Europe claimed, tried to blame her parents, you know. They are manipulating her. My answer was, I hope they do. I hope. Why shouldn't we, the left, also manipulate? But what I like is precisely, I didn't like her at the beginning. You remember when she played that innocent girl who is telling us that the emperor is naked. But did you notice how in the last year or man, she has this almost a little bit of diabolic, aggressive smile. I like the mean Greta Thunberg. I don't like the good, innocent girl. And I also refer to her as this, you know, for me, she is deeply feminine, but not the usual notion of femininity promoted by the media today. Holistic dialogue. No. She is quite dogmatic, insistent. That's what we need today. And I don't need anything more. Okay, we can debate the name, but I think that what she is doing is definitely communists today are for me Greta Thunberg, Assange, and so on. Incidentally, do you know the story? I must repeat it to you. I hope all of you don't know it. When I visited him 2 weeks ago in prison. It's wonderful. I couldn't believe it. I'm sorry if some of you know it. I was sitting close to him like this in open space at the table. A friend brought me a cup of coffee, plastic cover. I took the cover off and drank some coffee and put coffee back on the table. In 2 seconds, literally, a guard was there, very gentle, soft, no terror. I just said, please, sir, put the cover, plastic cover back on the coffee. I asked afterwards, I didn't want to cause problems there, why? They told me, you were sitting opposite Assange, an evil man. It was for my own good, they told me. They wanted to block the possibility that evil men like Assange will grab the boiling coffee and throw it into my face and so on. No, but I think, okay, these are my heroes.
You
today.
like alternate scenarios, right?
No, there is no alternate here.
I'd like
Greta Thunberg exists.
What's the alternate scenario where you write books which are not so much pastiche, not so much bringing together of disparate elements, but you become a kind of realistic, non-Hegelian preacher almost, like Greta Thunberg, return somewhat to your Catholic roots, embrace your right moderate side, retire in Singapore, and go gallivanting off with me to the food stalls where we share your sense of humor with my right-wing friends.
First,
what does that alternative scenario look
Singapore,
like?
It's Ecuador, it's too hot for me. If I retire, and I'm not lying to you now, 2-3 times I've written about it. I want to retire to the part of Norway which is not even Norway. I'm not kidding. I wrote about it. It's my ideal place. Longyearbyen, Svalbard Islands. That's my ideal place. It's half empty, nothing there, and it's very good prospects for survival because you know the joke. It's prohibited to die there. Because...
But last question.
No, but
the
quite
alternate
seriously.
scenario where you evolve in this manner with your right-wing sense of humor. What does that look like?
Why do you call
what
it
has to
right
happen?
wing? It's the humor of my youth, my God.
Yes, thank you. What has to happen for that scenario to come about? I'm not saying it will happen, but what does that science fiction world look like? What would you have to see in the world?
I will tell you, no, I'm not trying to make cheap propaganda for myself, but I did try to practice this, one of my books, which was not full failure, but close to a failure, my rewriting of Antigone. Did you read that one?
No, I have not read that one.
I loved that one. You know what I did? It's precisely alternate scenario. And you will not like the third version, I took Antigone. But you should like it because it's very pragmatic. It's pure alternate logic, like Kieślowski's film and that Lola runs and so on. First, I took the way the story you have in Sophocles, which incidentally is not the original story. The original Greek myth is totally different. Okay, you know what happens. I will not repeat them. Then, at the moment of her big conflict in the middle of the play with Creon, I play alternate reality. She wins. Creon says, okay, you are right, let's allow the burial. In my scenario, what happens is that as Creon suspected, there is again a revolt, again a traitor. The whole of Thebes, the city, is in ruin. And at the end of the second version, he walks desperate in the city and cries like that famous, hit line of Antigone. I was created for love, not for war, that, and the chorus answers her, fuck you, bitch, but that's what you created. Then comes the third version.
Last word is for you, but you have 38 seconds, so use them wisely.
Yeah. The third version that you will like, I hope, is while Creon and Antigone are fighting, the chorus steps over, said, you are both traitors, ruining the city, you should both be liquidated, and they establish a kind of Jacobin terror, and they're both liquidated. Nobody likes this. I don't.
Slavoj, thank you very much.
Thank you.